Good morning, good evening. My name is Shirish, and I'm part of the Game Changers cohort. I'm a director of data sciences at Target Corporation. And for those of you who are outside of US and did not hear about Target before, it is one of the largest big box retailers in America. It has about 2,000 stores across all the states in US and has about close to $100 billion in annual revenue. Justina, you're trying to say something?
Hi, Shirish. Yes, sorry to interrupt. The screen that you're sharing is, I think, presenter view. So we're actually seeing your notes and not the full slide.
I thought I shared properly, but I guess I made a mistake. How about now?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So when I first read about the theme that we have for Me to We conference this year about self-care and finding connections within ourselves and with the community, the first thing that kind of came to my mind is the culture and values that we emphasize at Target. So I invited two of the senior leaders that we from our organization who kind of embody these values and culture in their day-to-day work. They graciously accepted my request. Thank you so much. And it's my honor and privilege to introduce both of them to you this morning. Brad Thompson, who's a Senior Vice President of Data Sciences at Target, and Andrea Zimmerman, who's a VP of HR Operations and Strategy. And both of them are veterans in Target and would love to share their thoughts with us. With that,
Thank you very
Brad
much.
can take it over.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So culture as a compass to navigate chaos is the title of our presentation. And there are many, many leadership books written about the importance of building an organizational culture because culture matters. But what does that really look like in a large for-profit company like Target? And is it just something that's talked about once or twice a year by a subset of the HR department? Probably at a lot of places, but Andrea and I want to talk about how we've experienced something quite different over the last several years at Target. And as Shirish mentioned, Target is a large company, over $100 billion in sales a year. And so we'd like to share our experience. We both work at Target headquarters in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, and have for several years. But one caveat is that neither of us are management consultants, okay? Neither of us are experts in corporate culture. Rather, we are just leaders at a company whose culture we happen to love. And we'd like to share how that culture has directly affected very important decisions that we've made in the wake of the killing of George Floyd in 2020, and also Target's decision to become America's safest place to shop in the early days of the pandemic. So before we go into the heart of the presentation, I want to pause and to emphasize that Andrea and I present our thoughts in the spirit of humility. We happen to love the culture at Target, but we also know that there are lots of different kinds of organizational cultures with values that are different than our own. We compete against companies with very different cultures than Target has, and they're very successful at what they do. So this isn't a presentation on why the culture we work with is the best, although Andrea and I like it an awful lot. Rather, it's about how culture can really be used as a compass in times of extreme turmoil, which we've really gone through in the last 3 years. So here's how we thought we would spend the next 45 to 50 minutes is I'm going to talk a little bit about the culture at Target, just so that you're all grounded in what our culture is. And then Andrea and I are going to go through and focus on a couple of really specific proof points, which I referenced earlier, for how the culture helped guide company decisions and influence our actions. Actions that, frankly, were really important decisions that affected the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. And then we thought we would reserve 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions. If you have them, feel free to drop them in chat along the way, and Shirish can lob them at us at the end. But as a reminder, we're not experts on culture. We're only culture practitioners. So with that, I'm going to move ahead, Shirish. So just so we're all grounded, this is a pretty standard definition of culture. And I like it, but to me, what's really important is to notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that everyone has to, in a culture, a common culture, it doesn't say that everybody has to look the same, that everybody has to have the same lived experiences. It doesn't say that you have to vote for the same political party or anything like that. There is lots of room, in my opinion, for dimensions of difference inside of a common culture. And I hope that that'll be one of the themes that comes through loud and clear as we talk through our examples at Target. Therese? So here's what we know about culture. If you look through these, and you can, I'm not going to read them verbatim because you're all literate, but these are bite-sized morsels of what any organizational consultant would highlight on why culture matters. And the middle point really rings especially true, I think, for those of us that work at Target. We donate 5% of all of our pre-tax dollars to help the communities in which we do business, which is to say pretty much all of the United States. And our teams, they log hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours each year. It is a part of our culture and has been since the company was founded in 1962. And so as we move along, I want to play a video for you. Don't go there yet, Shirish, but I want to play a video for you, and it's really short. We debated whether or not to play it because we don't want it to come across as an advertisement for like why Target is a great company. Rather, though, we chose to show it because it's an example of the way we talk about our culture inside the company to our teams. It highlights how purpose-driven we are, but it's only one of the many, many, many different mediums through which we signal to our team members what we value as a company. So as you watch the video, just sort of think about, this is an example of how we talk to our teams about the culture, and it's how thick the culture is at Target.
If there's one thing all Target team members have in common, it's that we love to make an impact. So whenever we come together to solve a challenge, or make room for more voices and ideas, or help a guest feel more joy, that's when we know we're doing it right. Culture starts with our shared values, inclusivity, connection, and drive. When we bring these qualities into our day-to-day, we foster a culture that propels us to do great work, a culture that empowers and uplifts each of us. When inclusivity, connection, and drive are in action, you'll see growth and feel care. And the difference that makes for the team and for our guests goes beyond our doors. Though we don't know all the challenges ahead, the decisions to be made, or the effort it will take, we'll work together. By valuing diverse perspectives, building trusted relationships to widen our reach, and by learning at every opportunity, it starts with you. Bringing inclusivity, connection, and drive to your everyday makes anything possible.
And so again, the point is that this isn't something that is tucked away on some some intranet site somewhere that nobody ever looks at. Our culture and the various aspects of our culture are things that we talk about with our teams incessantly. And we picked this video. There were 15 others we could have picked. There, are screen grabs of other collateral we could have picked. I mean, it's everywhere because again, the culture is really, really thick, and we're proud of the culture and we talk about it a lot. One of the things that really comes through that video for me as a team member at Target and as a leader of a large team at Target is the connection that we try to make between our culture and the impact that it has on the business that we are in. How the culture affects the way we treat our team and our guests in our stores. By the way, we refer to our customers in our stores as guests. And so to get more specific, here's Target's, if you go to the next slide, here's Target's company purpose. The reason we exist in the world, which is to help all families discover the joy of everyday life. That's our mission in life. And you can see here as we break down what that means, how we help our team sort of, understand why that's our vision, why that's our mission. But I wanted you guys to be grounded in how we think of our mission before we get into some of the cultural aspects of it. So if you go to the next slide. So this one feels very, consultancy. This is a framework. Everybody loves a framework, right? Anybody in a leadership symposium loves a framework. So we thought we would show this with you. Our framework represents the shared language, the expectations, the vision for culture that describes Target at its best. This is what we think of when Target's at its best. It includes really clear team member expectations to fuel our strategy and just our strategy and purpose. So first we have our why, which is why we exist for our guests. It is what our culture and strategy are both in service of. Then there is the what our culture is at its best, which is to care and grow and win together. And just about every team member at Target, all 400,000 plus of them, could tell you that that's what our culture is, to care, to grow, and to win together. This is what we want our team members to experience working at Target. So what do those mean? Care. It means that we, simply put, we show up for each other. We make people the priority. And above all, we treat each other with respect. We believe in lifting each other up, valuing our relationships with one another and our guests above all else. What do we mean by grow? It means that we invest in our people. We focus on their development, their career development, and we create opportunities to help people reach their fullest potential. We believe a lot in helping people define what they think they want to be, what skills they want to develop, and then really try to create equitable opportunities for them to reach that fullest potential. And we believe as a core value that continuous learning and improving is the best way to grow our business. And then win together. We love to win. We like to be successful. There's no doubt about that. But we want to do the right thing, and we want to win the right way and succeed as part of a team. So we believe in the collective power of difference to help us accomplish more and to constantly make things better for each other and for our guests. So it's not just about achievement, it's about winning in the right way. And I would say that is a big part of what makes the culture special for me, at least. So in terms of our values, you can see values there of inclusivity, connection, drive. What we've really learned from our team is that those values resonated very powerfully and were extremely relevant for our team members, regardless of where they worked in the company, whether they were at headquarters, whether they were in a distribution center, whether they worked in stores, whether they worked in a sourcing office overseas. And simple words that have so much meaning behind them. In our quest for simplicity and memorable language, it was important that all of our team members really see themselves in and understand our values. So the main point of this presentation is to share how our culture helped us make what I would say are some really tough and important decisions in the face of crisis. So we're going to go back to 2020. And I'm going to hand it off to Andrea to discuss one of our first areas, our first proof points, so to speak.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. I love to see the chat as well. So it's fun to watch the group engage with the content in that way too. And what I would underscore, Brad, before I jump into the proof point specifically that I'm going to talk about is this concept that, at the root of it, a really strong culture. If you think about your friend units or a team that you were on or a classroom project that you worked on or a job that you've had, and you think about the best of the moments that you've experienced, you likely would attribute a really strong sense of belonging to that particular moment in time, because at the root of it, culture and the culture of a team or like is a living, breathing thing. And it is really about a sense of feeling seen and understood and belonging to a unit. And that is like trust is really inherent in that, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is one of the things that, you know, as Brad said, like we're very partial to the culture of the organization that we work at, but regardless of where you work or the team that you're a part of, feeling a sense of belonging and trust is really important. Okay, so I'm going to talk specifically about our experience with COVID. So if you go back to just over 2 years ago, which feels like 7 lifetimes ago, if we can even remember it, it was for the US at least, the months after March was kind of chaotic. You know, we were trying to figure out how to homeschool kids and send corporate employees to work at home with technology they maybe never had at home. And there was a mad rush on toilet paper and masks and hand sanitizer and God only knows what else. I mean, it was a little bit of mayhem. And at this point in my own career, I was responsible for what we call the HR crisis team at Target. And prior to COVID, that meant how do we support our teams in times of crisis, most notably like natural disasters and hurricanes and earthquakes and wildfires and things like that. And so when COVID-19, the pandemic hit, that kind of opened up a whole entire new world for the work that I in particular did. And that included trying to figure out how to send 17,000 corporate employees home to successfully do their jobs and figure out how to shift our focus really quickly to our frontline team. And so I plugged into a cross-functional team that worked through every aspect of our response as an enterprise. And since then, I would tell you, it feels like I have had 2+ years now of every single day feeling like a whole bunch of firsts and really daily learning. But to share the proof point of our COVID response, I do actually want to start with the culture conversation that Brad started to have with you. The distinct thing about Target is that all the way back from the beginning of our existence, of the inception of the organization, decades and decades and decades ago, our culture has been rooted in care and connection. And so when we talk about a culture of care, grow, and win together, this has been shaping us for many, many, many years. And the role that culture plays at a time in crisis is really poignant, which is exactly what we're going to start to unpack. So if I come back now to the beginning of the pandemic, the simplest way, I think, to state the work that we did is that our culture of care positioned us to make bolder and better decisions to take care of our team, to take care of our guests, to take care of our communities and our business. And because our culture is so intertwined in our fabric, we were actually able to make really quick decisions with our team at the center. So there was this group of us, we got together and we were like, all right, so we need some guiding principles that are going to anchor us for how we make decisions going forward. And a couple of those guiding principles that we talked about were keeping our team members and their families healthy and safe, and leading with culture and not complexity. Those are actually 2 of the guiding principles. We said, this is what we want to be true about every decision we make through the whole entire pandemic. And if I put that in combination with care into perspective for you again, and Shirish did a lovely job of talking about like how we operate. Our team is over 400,000 people. We are in over 2,200 unique different locations. We are in all 50 states. We have a very large contingency in India at our headquarters there and other parts of the globe. But the vast majority of those 400,000 people, over 90% of them, represent our frontline team. They are individuals that work in our stores, that work in our distribution centers. They are individuals that are interacting with the community that they live in the suburbs, in urban areas, and everywhere in between. And so And our corporate center is really small. And we had to figure out, how do you apply these guiding principles and the decisions that you make, keeping that frontline team at the center, knowing the inherent need and risk that is associated with supporting them, as well as how do we make sure that they are feeling very well cared for. And so when we talk about the impact of putting our own team first so that then they could take care of others, there's this really significant magnifying impact on the communities across the country. So I'm going to give you a couple of different very specific examples of where we could have taken a left and instead we took a right, based on the fact that we were really rooted in the strength of a culture of care. So very early on, people were scrambling to try to figure out, how do we find QR codes to have people do health checks at the point of entry of a turnstile of an office building? How do we buy enough plexiglass to set up plexiglass temperature taking stanchions and parking lots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And we thought to ourselves, well, we could do any of those things, but what would really putting our team at the center of this decision look like? And what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to keep our team and their families healthy and safe. Well, if we want to keep them healthy and safe, that means they never leave the house if they're sick in the first place. So we're not dragging them to work to take their temperature if they don't feel well and then figuring out how to send them home. We're saying, hey, if you don't feel well, don't come in the first place. And so we figured out a way to enable our teams to do their health checks for themselves and their families in their own house. We sent everybody thermometers and tools to actually care for themselves. We figured out different ways to impact access to care for when they needed it. And so it was one first, I think, major decision that we made that really, when everybody else was going one way, we found a way to go another way and actually inherently take better care of our team. Another one is when schools and daycares were closing their doors and people were having a really hard time finding consistent quality care for their kiddos. We doubled down in offering things like free backup care, discounts for tutoring and education resources, help to find a nanny, et cetera. So that parents who needed and wanted to find a path to get into the office or into a store, into a distribution center, felt really confident in the care that they were giving to their kids. And for those times when they needed to be home instead, we forgave absences, provided leave support, and all sorts of other good stuff. The last thing that I would highlight as far as just where care anchored us, and I could go on for days on this topic, so I will give you one more and then I'll stop, is we are an interconnected global team. And so when our US teams were really experiencing, I think, the brunt of peak cases and a lot of other things in the community, our very large team in India sort of stood up and demonstrated a level of support for our US team that was extraordinarily meaningful. And when India and other parts of Asia later saw just devastating impacts of surges, our US team stood up and flexed to work differently in support of them so that they could take the time that they needed in order to support their families through alternative hours and different prioritization and things like that. And so this thread of care really just sort of runs through the decisions that we've made day after day after day over the last few years. We started at the beginning of this pandemic with a really strong root of how we care for each other. That has served us well and will continue to do so. And it's going to continue to shape the work in front of us. So right now, we are trying to figure out for our corporate employees in particular, like, what is work going to look like in the future? And we are anchored to our culture as we make those decisions. What I would leave you with as you just sort of consider culture at a time of chaos is, whatever your culture is, it comes out loudly during a time of crisis. You cannot fake it. You cannot decide to create culture in a time of crisis. That is the fabric of who you are, and who you are is what's going to show up. And we believe that our our culture and our values actually pulled us through and guided us through some really tough decisions. So that is where, Brad, I don't know if you think I missed anything, but that would be sort of like what I would summarize for the COVID side of the house.
Yeah, so the second little case study, I guess, or second proof point that I'll use to talk about our culture was also happened in 2020. It was May 25th, 2020, when George Floyd was killed by the Minneapolis police, and it led to outrage pretty much across all of the United States and even internationally. And so for some of the people that are maybe international on the call, you know, this may not quite resonate as well as it does for some of the US people that are on the call. But when George Floyd was killed, it had a profound impact on us as a company. And I don't use the word profound lightly. Our team was outraged, angry, sad. I mean, all the emotions. And for the leadership team at Target, it was really a catalyst. We knew we had a responsibility to respond in an outsized way. And the reason we thought we had to respond in an outsized way is because it happened in Minneapolis, just a few miles from where we're headquartered. And then also, more than 50% of our 400,000 plus team members in our stores are people of color. And they deal with the manifestations of racism every single day, whether that's behavioral or whether it's structural. So first I'll talk about how it affected our behaviors. Going back to care, our team members needed to talk about this at work, not just at home, not just at church, but at work. And we openly encouraged it at all levels of the company. I remember being in an officer meeting, and for us, officer is like, you know, the top 200 positions at the company. I remember our CEO, Brian Cornell, leading an officer meeting after it happened, where he shared his own learning journey on the lived experiences of Black team members. And then he gave the floor to one of our senior vice presidents, who courageously shared a personal story about his own home being broken into by police because they didn't think any Black people lived in the area. And the story had a profound impact on me. And we hosted listening sessions all over the company. And it was in these months that we really doubled down to encourage people to bring their whole selves to work, issues and all. And it was the only way for us to build real empathy with our teams and to create a sense of belonging for our Black team members in particular in that moment. And it was really hard. You know, when you encourage your teams to talk about issues that are affecting their psychosis, their well-being, it gets pretty messy and emotional, and it's difficult and uncomfortable. Our former chief diversity officer used to say that DEI is a hand-to-hand combat sport. It's not comfortable. I was extremely self-conscious as a white male. With all my privilege, I was really uncomfortable leading sessions like that. But at some point, it occurred to me that just listening to others is not enough. To demonstrate care, then advocacy and action on my part were required. So our culture of care in those months in particular gave us the room to have these conversations like up and down the organization, at headquarters, in stores, and even with our vendors, wherever. So obviously behavior changes were necessary, but they're not sufficient. So we wanted our response as a company to be the opposite of token. And what I mean by that is that we didn't want to take a quick lap around the DEI track and let the urgency lapse once the headlines receded from the front page. Instead, we really wanted to use our size and our scale as a large company to make a meaningful and sustained impact in the lives, in particular, of our Black team members and our Black guests. And so in the summer of 2020, we augmented our existing DEI strategy and tactics to have some distinct energy and focus for Black team members and guests. And we established what we call the Racial Equity Action and Change Committee. We call it REACH for shorthand, because our data showed that we had significant work to do on behalf of this community. And the work is led by a group of senior leaders from across Target who have job responsibilities that sort of reflect all the key focus areas and represent a really diverse range of perspectives and expertise. And REACH is focused in 4 key areas. It's focused on building an inclusive team member or inclusive experience, work environment for our Black team members. It also is focused as its second pillar on creating an inclusive guest environment for Black Americans. So can Black guests, customers come into a Target and find products that, that speak to them, that are interested in them, that come from Black-owned businesses, for example, that basically resonate with them. The third pillar is about supporting Black communities more generally. And then the fourth pillar is around convening various partners in lots of different communities to impact civic discussions. And those are the 4 pillars. And so our culture of care with values around inclusivity, it drove us to have, lots of different changes to our behaviors, but then also more structural changes to kind of throw our resources and our scale behind initiatives, and to really, frankly, it sounds a bit crass, but to put our money where our mouth is. And this all resonated with our team. Even in the stores, like turnover among our team members in our stores is lower now than it was before the pandemic. And I personally don't think that's a coincidence. I think some of the things that Andrea talked about in terms of showing care and making the stores the safest place to shop, I think that resonated with our guests and our team members. I think the very real and genuine response we had to the killing of George Floyd resonated with our team members. I think the manifestation of our values of inclusivity, connection, and drive, I do think that they play a big part in that. And we've, for all those goals that we've set for the last 3 years, we've surpassed nearly all of those goals. And we're actually rolling out our next set of 3-year goals for 2022 through 2024 around representation, around advancement and retention, and around equitable experience. So those are two proof points. Andrea, I don't know anything I missed there around our response to George Floyd, REACH, listening sessions, et cetera.
Oh, I think you did a beautiful job. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, those are the prepared comments that we have about how we think our culture has helped us navigate crisis and respond to crisis in a way that created connection with our team. And we're pretty, all companies make mistakes, of course, but we're pretty proud of how we've navigated the last couple of years. And again, it's to be culture led and driven by that culture.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brad and Andrea. There are a few questions in the chat. I think Andrea responded to some, but I'll put them out anyway. So Brad, if you want to add any of your thoughts. First one is, how do you quantify, which is essentially monitoring and measuring cultural health in the organization on an ongoing basis?
So where I started, Brad, and you can feel free to chime in at the high level, and I think that came from Tomas. So I will. There's a follow-up there. We have a very robust listening strategy at Target, and it has been something that we have invested in a pretty significant way over the last few years, both from a technology standpoint as well as breadth. And we've worked to evolve the way we've listened. So we have always done an annual sort of listening moment for as long as I can remember. But over the past couple of years, we really thought about what would listening more frequently and more deeply with our team actually look like. And so we have now a weekly listening mechanism, a deeper annual listening mechanism, and a way to listen to our frontline team, our corporate employees, our global team, and everybody in between. And that listening strategy is about really understanding with a good amount of depth what sentiment is, and then taking very specific actions from what we learn from that sentiment. And so as far as like, how do we, what's the practical application? It is the thing that drives how we talk to our team, programs that we put in place for our team, how we respond to our team, et cetera. Really specific example I would tell you from the headquarters side is we are now asking our headquarter team members specifically a number of questions, probably every 2 to 3 months, about how their experience working from home is. And what our team tells us is directly what we intake and then what we respond to based on what they tell us. So, hey, we could really use some more support around X, Y, or Z to further enable our working from home. Awesome. Here you go. Here's different peripherals. Here's a small stipend. Here's et cetera, et cetera. And so that's kind of the feedback, I would say like the loop that we're in with listening has as much to do with what you hear as well as how you build the trust with what you do with what you hear. Our senior leadership team is extraordinarily invested in what we hear. And so we are talking on a regular basis about what our team is telling us and how we think that should impact how we communicate and the practices that we put in place. Brad, anything that I missed?
Yeah, so the survey that Andrea refers to, it is a big, big deal at Target. And so she just gave you an answer from the perspective of like HR, I think, from HR. I'll give you the perspective from just a leader in the company that uses the survey to listen to my team. Each leader of a team, the survey is done anonymously. The leader of each team gets the feedback on a broad set of questions that are designed to measure, of course, what the team member thinks about Target, thinks about culture, thinks about the leader they report to and the culture of their team in particular. And each director or each leader of people gets the responses, meaning like they get all the measurements for all the questions and they see what their team thinks about them and the culture they're creating on the team. I see the breakdown of every one of my leaders of people that work up in my organization. And then, of course, the head of, in my case, IT, but also the head of marketing, the head of stores, the head of finance, the head of HR, all the different functions in the company see the entire roll-up of the responses for their teams. And the officers, at least of the company, can see also the rolls up of all the other functions in the company as well. So it is not something that's done sort of behind the curtain and you never quite know like what's going on, what the pulse of the company is. We actually talk very openly about the results, and every leader has to have action plans to sort of deal with the feedback that they're getting in the survey. And we even ask team members, do you feel like the survey has been responded to? Do you feel like your leaders have been responsive to what was in the survey? So again, it's, every company, most companies take surveys of some kind. I would say for us, it's about what we do with the information, how seriously we take it. That's, pretty unique.
And a couple of things around, I think as a follow-up, Samia asked in the beginning as well, like how does culture play a role as we hire and grow as a team? And I think even Priyanka's question in the chat is also around similar. How do we put culture as a lens?
I think about, I hire a lot of people and I'm in a lot of interviews. I conduct a lot of interviews. I am more interested in assessing for fit in our culture than I am going through all of the achievements that the candidate has had in their past career. I trust our recruiting team that they're going to bring to me candidates that are smart, candidates that have accomplished a lot. I just sort of take that as a given. All the candidates for a given position are going to have that. I spend my time trying to see, is this person, they have the same values we have as a company? Because I've made every hiring mistake I've made in the past is because when I sort of talked myself into a bad fit. Like, okay, this person is a little bit of a lone wolf. They really like to achieve individually, but I think we can probably change them a little bit. Our culture's, thick enough that we can change, and it doesn't work. And so when I go back to every time I've had a hire that didn't work out, it's almost always because they were not a good fit for the culture, rather than they weren't ambitious enough or they didn't have the right experience. So we in interviews, we use behavioral-based interviewing to try and get at fit and to assess not only what somebody has done, but how they've gone about accomplishing it.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I would build on top of that is a long time ago, fit used to be, do I want to go have a drink with this person? Do they look like me? Do we come from the same school? There's some real science behind things like confirmation bias. Who do we feel most comfortable with, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we talk about fit, we are talking about, I go back to the beginning of this conversation where we talk about culture is a living, breathing thing where you are in relationship with people who have common values. It is not, we look the same, we have the same background, we come from the same place, we believe in the same thing. It is about, we believe in winning together. We believe in putting each other in our team first. We believe in creating an environment where belonging and inclusivity is a priority. It's about the connective tissue on the shared values, and not about, I like this person is just so easy to talk to because, we have so many things in common, right?
Yeah, I think so. This probably you talked earlier, but I'll just ask anyway. Stacy's question on, have you queried employees to determine the success? Because often what leadership says is the right thing, but what frontline teams are experiencing is a totally different thing. Survey is definitely one way to get that feedback, but are there any other mechanisms that that we think about?
Well, in our stores, our store directors, the same kinds of routines that we have at headquarters, for example, for talking to our team, for understanding their plans for skill development, career growth, et cetera. Those exact same mechanisms and routines exist in every single store in our chain. The store directors are measured on the culture inside the store, and they take personal responsibility for creating the culture inside their store. So, there's, of course, that you can triangulate lots of different ways to try and, measure how healthy the culture is. You can look at attrition. You can look at, survey feedback. You can look at if you're trying to measure how inclusive the culture is, you can look at, say, promotion rates among team members of color in the store versus, white team members. There's all sorts of indicators that can help you form a complete picture of what the culture looks like in the store. But honestly, what it comes down to is, how is the store performing? Because a store will not perform if the team that runs the store is not engaged in the culture of the store. So you can look at guest satisfaction, you can look at the growth in sales, you can look at all sorts of other business-facing metrics as a lagging indicator of how strong the culture is inside the store.
And I think Piyush's question was, how much of an impact did culture have on our growth, especially in the last couple of years during the pandemic, right? When company did obviously remarkably well, and it showed up in the stock price, obviously.
I'll take a first pass at that one, and then Brad, you can keep me honest on the answer. One of the things that so we just had our financial community meeting not that long ago, which is sort of our conversation with the analysts about how we feel about the year that we had, and we had a really solid year. And what's really struck me as I listened to that very public conversation is our leadership team is not up there talking about the numbers, the numbers, the numbers, the numbers, the numbers. Every single member of our leadership team, as they talked about our performance and our strategy going forward, started with the team, ended with the team, underscored the team throughout. Started with our culture, underscored our culture, and talked about our culture throughout. And so you can't separate, for us, like you cannot separate out our culture from our performance. They're wound in together, from how we talk about it internal to how we talk about it with the street. And so when we think about how much of an impact did our culture have on our growth, that's like asking like how much of an impact our team had on our growth, which is everything in that particular sense. So Brad?
Yeah, I don't know that I have too much more to add there. There is what you do, and there is how you go about doing it. And to me, culture is all about the how you go about doing it. But almost always, especially in the last 2 years, in response to COVID-19 and trying to navigate those waters, in almost all cases, when we had to make a big decision, the thing that we put first was, how is this decision going to affect the team? Mm-hmm. How it was going to affect results was kind of a secondary thought for us. The team was first. Now we are in solid financial shape, so we have a strong balance sheet. We are able to sort of weather storms because of the assets that we have as a company, et cetera. And so we are afforded that luxury. But even if we weren't, I guarantee you, we would still be making decisions through the lens of what is the right thing to do for the team. I feel really confident with that.
Yeah, I think that brings us to the close, actually. Thank you so much again, Brad and Andrea, for joining us and sharing your thoughts. There are multiple other questions, but unfortunately, we're at time now. But before we leave, any final thoughts from both of you? Or something that we can take forward in our daily lives, I guess?
Well, there's a lot of pressure to come up with something provocative. I guess the only other thing I would say is, as we all pick who we work for, we all pick, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a for-profit, we all choose who we work for the most part. And I would argue that cultural fit is a big part of that choice, or it's at least a big part of the choice to stay working for who we work for. And that means that for all of you who are emerging leaders or existing leaders, your teams are thinking about culture and fit. And so I guess I would leave you with, to what degree can you say that you are intentionally defining the culture on your team and reinforcing those behaviors that you want to see out of your team? And I would say that it's worth you thinking long and hard about, because I think it makes a big difference to the team that reports to you and looks up to you.
Mm-hmm. I would just put like an exclamation point and an underscore with what you said, Brad. I think I often will tell people on my own team, like, we spend more time with each other often than we even do with our families some weeks, just based on like how much time you spend working. And so who you work with and who you surround yourself with matters. And you should feel like those people and that team that you're on are worthy of what you're bringing, and that it is reciprocal, and that you feel belonging, and all of the things that are important to you. So
thank you very much for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
thanks,
thank
everyone.
you.